On June 12, 2026, Wall Street bankers witnessed the biggest listing of their careers. SpaceX, the rocket company belonging to the world's richest man, Elon Musk, officially landed on the Nasdaq on its first day of trading. The stock price soared 19%, pushing its market value to $2.1 trillion, setting a new record for the largest IPO in human history. Musk himself became the first trillionaire in human history, with a net worth of $1.1 trillion, more than the combined wealth of the world's second through fifth richest people. Hundreds of SpaceX employees instantly became millionaires or billionaires. Even welders and janitors at the company ended up with seven-figure fortunes. But this company, which has now broken so many human records, was once dismissed by almost everyone as a scam. Just 24 years ago, back then, Musk wasn't the world's richest man yet. Keep the company alive. He nearly went bankrupt, his marriage fell apart, and he even had to swallow his pride and borrow money from people who hated him. In the end, SpaceX created the greatest miracle in the history of business. How did this happen? This piece will break down one of the wildest gambles in human history. How Musk built SpaceX from zero and personally rang the bell that shook the entire world. Chapter 1. The lonely genius. Unlike most finance writers who like to start with business models and financial statements, I prefer to start with the person, because behind every great company is, at its core, a single human being. A fire inside someone's heart becomes a company's vision, and that vision decides where the company will go. Where did Musk's obsession with space come from? We all know Musk today has a sharp tongue. He trolls people online constantly, from heads of state to random influencers. If he doesn't like someone, he just starts talking trash. A lot of people assume it's because he's the richest man in the world, so he can afford to be arrogant. But even back in elementary school, when he was just a little kid, he was already like this, which is why he got beaten up by classmates regularly, once badly enough to land in the hospital. On top of that, his parents divorced early, which left young Musk somewhat disillusioned with life. Reading books became his escape from reality, and his most important emotional anchor. What kind of books most easily pull in a young boy? Guys reading this might want to think back to their own childhoods. For me, it was dinosaurs, unsolved mysteries, and alien science fiction novels. At age 13, I once cornered a female teacher and tried to convince her the moon landing was a hoax meant to bankrupt the Soviet Union, and she had no idea how to respond. Science fiction was also what fascinated Musk the most. But unlike me, who only knew how to brag to female teachers, Musk, at age 13, spent just 3 days learning the basics of programming, then built his own space shooter game. Once he got bored of it, he sold it to a magazine for $500. At this point, you already know Musk was never an ordinary person. Aside from being annoying enough to get punched, he was simply a genius. By elementary school, Musk had read so much that he ran out of science fiction novels available in his entire city. Reading that much science fiction tends to spark a deep fascination with huge topics like civilization and the universe. For most kids, those fantasies about spaceships, interstellar colonization, and saving civilization usually fade away by high school. But for Musk, they never faded. Instead, they grew stronger as he got older and learned more. Eventually, this formed a mission that would change his entire life. To prevent humanity from destroying itself on Earth, we must turn human civilization into a multi-planetary species and extend the light of human consciousness to the stars. More than 30 years later, Musk posted online that it was Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, which he read as a kid, that inspired him to later found SpaceX. You could say that Musk's almost obsessive sense of mission largely comes from the books he read as a teenager. Honestly, most of us probably have some kind of personal mission or a true calling hidden inside us somewhere. But most people don't discover it until their 30s or 40s. Once they've seen more of the world, some never discover it at all. But if you read widely as a teenager and learn about all the different things and careers that exist in this world, maybe you'll find that seed inside you much earlier. Lei Jun, the founder of Xiaomi, was similarly ignited after reading Fire in the Valley during college. He was so fired up that he walked laps around the school track all night and decided the next day he'd build something big in tech. I personally studied architecture in college, but after reading Kevin Kelly's The Inevitable, I was so fired up I switched into the internet industry after graduation, and that eventually led me to where I am now, writing business analysis from the perspective of someone who's actually fought in the trenches. Anyway, getting off track. Back to Musk. In college, Musk majored in physics. He believed physics could be used to solve essentially any engineering problem, and this became the foundation for what he later called first principles thinking. Around this time, he already started talking about building a rocket that could fly to Mars. By the time he was about to graduate, Musk had already mapped out the direction of his life. In his view, there were only 3 fields truly worth dedicating an entire life to: the internet, sustainable energy, and space exploration. The 3 companies Musk later founded, PayPal, Tesla, and SpaceX, map exactly onto these 3 areas that a lot of Chinese people admire Wang Yangming's philosophy of unifying knowledge and action. Musk probably has never heard of Wang Yangming, but he may well be the best modern example of that exact idea. Back in the 90s, though, the freshly graduated Musk understood that as a poor student with no connections, jumping straight into building rockets or electric cars was unrealistic. The most important thing first was to make money and build up capital. For his first venture, Musk chose internet entrepreneurship, which was already booming in America at the time. He went on to create Zip2, essentially an American version of a local business directory, and then PayPal, essentially an American version of Alipay. The bad news is that after PayPal succeeded, Musk's abrasive personality led to a boardroom coup that kicked him out of the company he founded. The good news is that selling his PayPal shares still netted him $180 million, making him financially free. The group of people who founded PayPal alongside Musk later became known as the PayPal Mafia, and many of them went on to dominate Silicon Valley for the next 2 decades. For an ordinary person, becoming a self-made billionaire at 31 would already be the ultimate happy ending. But for Musk, this was just the warm-up before the real story of his life began. After leaving PayPal, a friend asked Musk what he planned to do next. Musk answered, "I'm going to colonize Mars." Chapter 2. Mocked by the RES after leaving PayPal, all Musk had was a cold $180 million in his pocket. He didn't buy mansions or yachts to enjoy life. Instead, he started thinking about a plan to get to Mars. In his spare time, he kept browsing NASA's website and discovered that after the once glorious moon landing program, once the Soviet Union collapsed, the bureaucrats at NASA simply lost interest in further space exploration. See, I told you the moon landing was just to bankrupt the Soviets. So Musk came up with a plan to buy a rocket and create a big media moment. Send a miniature greenhouse full of seeds into space and live stream the plants sprouting to the entire world. Hoping to reignite public excitement about space exploration, he didn't waste time. Russian launch vehicles were the cheapest at the time, so Musk flew to Russia to buy a rocket. When he got there, the Russians were clearly drunk. They talked trash at him constantly, and even spat at him. Having been beaten up at school plenty of times as a kid, this didn't really faze him, so he let it slide. But during price negotiations, the Russians had originally agreed to sell 2 rockets for $18 million. Just as Musk was ready to pay, they said it was actually $18 million per rocket. Musk was already cursing them out in his head, but he was still willing to compromise until they raised the price again to $21 million per rocket. At that point, they were straight up playing him for a fool. And an angry Musk walked away from the negotiating table. On the flight back, Musk pulled out his laptop and ran some numbers and discovered that the raw materials of a rocket only made up about 2% of its selling price. That led him to a shocking conclusion. Forget buying one that will build our OWNAT that moment. SpaceX was born. Chapter 3. Betting everything on the TL. In 2002, SpaceX was officially founded. Full name: Space Exploration Technologies Corporation. The first rocket Musk built was called Falcon 1, named after the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars, a classic sci-fi nerd naming choice. Musk set the team a target: go from zero to a completed rocket and first launch within 15 months. Musk had money, but $180 million was nothing compared to what building rockets, traditionally a task only entire nations could afford, actually required. Musk had to ruthlessly cut costs just to make the project viable at all. So to compress costs, he invented a metric he called the Idiot Index. The Idiot Index measured any component bought for Falcon 1. If the raw material cost was less than 10% of the purchase price, Musk insisted on building it in-house instead. In Musk's own words, if the idiot index of something you're making is high, then you're an idiot. As a result, nearly everything on Falcon 1, from the engine to the software to the control systems, ended up being built in Dash House, in America that prizes industrial division of labor. Musk single-handedly took on the entire aerospace industry. Even with Musk pushing costs down relentlessly and introducing a lot of design innovations, the Falcon 1, originally planned to launch in 15 months, ended up taking 4 years before its first launch. In April 2006, on a small island called Kwajalein in the Pacific, Falcon 1 prepared for its first launch. The moment the rocket lifted off, Musk and the hundreds of engineers who had spent 4 years on this project all held their breath, ready to witness the miracle they'd worked so hard for. But there was no miracle. Falcon 1 exploded just 25 seconds after liftoff, its burning debris falling into the ocean. 4 years of work turned to ash in half a minute. Musk didn't say much. He immediately sent a military helicopter to collect the debris, analyze the cause of the explosion, review what happened, and prepare for the next launch. The following year, Falcon 1 launched a second time and crashed again 11 minutes after liftoff. In 2008, Falcon 1 attempted its third launch. By this point, Musk's $180 million was nearly gone. This launch would drain the company's entire bank account. On top of that, this rocket was carrying satellites for the U.S. Air Force and NASA. If it failed, Musk would lose all his money and the trust of potential clients at the same time. But unfortunately, this launch failed too. Some opportunistic media outlets even wrote SpaceX's obituary in advance. Private companies exploring space is a joke, and Musk proved it with $180 million. Just as SpaceX's cash was about to run completely dry, every front in Musk's life collapsed at once. His other company, Tesla, was also on the brink of bankruptcy. His wife filed for divorce. Musk himself was nearly personally bankrupt. And as everyone knows, 2008 was also when America's subprime mortgage crisis hit, with a wave of bank failures, which slammed the door shut on outside funding. Even someone as tough as Musk nearly broke down during this period. He would regularly wake up from nightmares and run to the bathroom to throw up. But Musk never once thought about giving up. He already had wealth and reputation from PayPal's success. Why put himself through all this just to build rockets? The only explanation I can come up with is that Musk genuinely wanted to turn human civilization into a multi-planetary species. In desperation, Musk started borrowing money from friends. By this point he'd been a billionaire for several years, so his billionaire friends chipped in some $500,000, some $2 million. In the end, Musk even swallowed his pride and asked the very partners who had once ousted him from PayPal for a loan. Surprisingly, these former enemies still extended a helping hand and gave him $20 million. He finally scraped together enough money for a fourth launch. If the fourth launch failed too, SpaceX would shut down, Musk would go personally bankrupt, and the whole story of private companies exploring space would be over for good. On September 28, 2008, Falcon 1 attempted its fourth launch. Afraid to witness another failure in person, Musk didn't even go to the launch site this time. Instead, he went to Disneyland to wait for the results. While waiting, he even rode a roller coaster called Space Mountain. Musk does have a sense of humor, but in the end, he couldn't help himself and rushed back to mission control just 1 minute before launch. Falcon 1 launched at that very moment. 60 seconds later, the rocket entered the atmosphere. 2 minutes later, the second stage ignited. 9 minutes later, the rocket successfully reached its target orbit. It worked. It actually worked. The launch finally succeeded. Falcon 1 made history as the first privately built rocket in human history to reach space. Even without the privately built qualifier before this moment, only 3 superpowers, NASA, Russia, and China, had ever pulled this off. In that moment, Musk finally let out the cheer he'd been holding in for far too long. Some moments in life stay with you forever. For Musk, this was one of them. 3 months later, NASA sent over a contract worth $1.6 billion, asking SpaceX to help deliver cargo to the space station. From there, SpaceX entered the fast lane, becoming the undisputed leader in the private spaceflight sector and gaining acceptance from mainstream American society. In 2010, then President Obama personally visited and toured a Falcon rocket alongside Musk. Shortly after the president returned to Washington, the private sector model represented by SpaceX was formally established as the national strategy for America's space program. From then on, America's low Earth orbit transport missions gradually shifted entirely to private companies like SpaceX. SpaceX had effectively given birth to an entirely new industry on its own. The exact same thing happened with Musk's other company, Tesla. That very same year, Tesla also went public, and the wealth that generated made Musk a billionaire all over again. Since this piece is mainly about SpaceX, I might do a separate piece on Tesla someday, because that's an equally incredible story in its own right. Chapter 4. The crazy idea of reusable rockets. If Falcon 1 was about redoing, more cheaply and efficiently, something only major nations had previously managed to do, then Falcon 9 set out to do something even Major nations had never accomplished or even thought to attempt landing and reusing rockets. Why are rockets so expensive? Because under traditional aerospace logic, a rocket is a single-use item. Ignite, launch, complete the mission, crash back down. Once again applying first principles, Musk reasoned that a rocket is fundamentally a vehicle, just like a car, an airplane, or a ship. Would you sink a ship after using it just once? The Titanic being the obvious exception. Musk proposed having rockets fly themselves back and be reused. The whole industry laughed at this, including NASA's own experts. NASA, Boeing, Lockheed, and even the former Soviet Union had all attempted this with massive national resources before, and all had failed. The only lesson that remained was an almost ironclad rule. Once a rocket launches, it cannot turn back. Musk didn't trust conventional experience, that he only trusted his first principles. As long as something doesn't violate the laws of physics, it can be solved through engineering. If you guys are bad at this, does that mean I'm bad at it too? SpaceX set off down this path. Almost predictably, failure after failure followed. Explosion after explosion, crash after crash into the ocean. Then, on December 21st, 2015, on its fifth landing attempt, Falcon 9 finally succeeded at a steel giant roughly the height of a 20-plus story building plunged through the atmosphere vertically at hundreds of meters per second. Then, at an altitude of about 1 kilometer, it slowed to nearly a stop, gently settling back onto the ground in a cloud of smoke, completing a touchdown that would go down in human history. The first time I saw that footage, I was honestly speechless. In that moment, rockets stopped being single-use consumables and became reusable production tools. For the first time, humanity had a real, low-cost way to access space that if, 100 years from now, humanity truly becomes a multi-planetary civilization, and historians trace the story back to its origin, this is the moment they'll point to. I sometimes think that it was precisely because Falcon 1 didn't succeed until its fourth attempt that Musk learned to manage his expectations around failure, which is exactly what allowed Falcon 9 to keep going until its fifth attempt finally succeeded. This is actually a methodology I use in my own work. 2. I mentally assume the first 5 attempts at anything will all fail. But in my experience, as long as the underlying idea is sound, most projects succeed by their 5th or 6th attempt, and rarely take more than 9. It was around this time that I became a huge fan of Musk. I was curious how much someone this impressive was worth, and at the time it turned out to be only $13 billion. That's obviously more money than I'll ever make in my life. But compared to the other business titans of the time, like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Larry Ellison, it wasn't even close, putting him around 30th globally. At one point, I genuinely felt sorry for Musk, like the world didn't deserve him. Looking back now, that mindset wasn't all that different from obsessive fandom culture. That year, SpaceX's valuation hit $12 billion. Making it the undisputed leader in global commercial spaceflight. 3 years later, in 2018, the Falcon Heavy, 3 times the size of Falcon 9, took its first flight. On launch day, Musk loaded his own personal red Tesla Roadster into the rocket and sent it into space. Sitting in the driver's seat was a mannequin in a spacesuit named Starman. On the car's parts information plate was written, "Made on Earth by humans. Not made in USA. Not made by Tesla." National borders dissolved. Corporate identity dissolved. What remained was simply humanity, sending a greeting to the universe on behalf of an entire civilization. A.S. David Bowie's life on Mars, played on loop through the car stereo. This moment became a shared memory for all of humanity. After completing its mission, the Falcon booster landed on a drone ship named, of course, I Still Love You. I genuinely struggle to think of anything more romantic than that. Ever since the iPhone 4 launched in 2010, Apple sat for a long time at the peak of where technology and humanity intersect on this planet. While domestic phone makers in China were still racing to outspec Apple, Musk casually sent a Tesla flying toward Mars and effortlessly pushed the fusion of engineering and romance to a level never seen before. But even the already impressive Falcon rockets were, in Musk's eyes, just a transitional product, only capable of handling commercial missions in low Earth orbit. His goal was never just launching a few satellites. That IT was sending humans to Mars, and even bigger, even crazier rocket entered development. Its name, Starship. Starship stands 124 meters tall, roughly equivalent to a 40-story skyscraper, with a fully loaded liftoff weight of over 5,300 tons. That IT is the largest rocket humanity has ever built. And the reason it's designed to be this enormous is simple. Starship is meant to transport large numbers of people and supplies to Mars. More importantly, Starship isn't just bigger, it's also meant to be cheaper. In the NASA era, launching 1 kilogram of cargo into space cost about $55,000. Falcon 9 brought that cost down to $2,700. Starship aims to bring it down to under $100. In 2021, on the side, Tesla's market cap soared to $770 billion, and Musk became the richest person in the world. That massive personal fortune all flowed into Starship as essentially unlimited ammunition. After multiple test flights, explosions, and further testing, Starship has now basically taken shape. During Starship's development, Musk decided the existing rocket recovery method still wasn't efficient enough and proposed going even further, using a mechanical arm on the launch tower to literally catch the returning rocket. If the arm could catch the booster securely, it would reduce landing damage to the rocket's components. After simple maintenance and refueling, the rocket could quickly return to service, boosting launch efficiency. A colleague said this idea was as absurd as catching a fly mid-flight with a pair of chopsticks. Impossible, as usual. If the laws of physics don't say no, then it's fair game. Musk even nicknamed the mechanical arms chopsticks. You really have to admit, sometimes Musk's naming sense is about on par with an elementary schooler's. In October 2024, Starship's fifth test flight took place. The 200-ton Starship descended slowly through thick clouds, looking from a distance almost like a glowing cigarette ash falling from the sky. That IT finally landed gently onto the launch tower, caught securely by the mechanical arms. For the first time in human history, a launch tower's mechanical arms caught a returning super heavy lift rocket. The landing was so smooth it was easy to forget this was the largest rocket ever built by humans, and the efficiency of space transport was about to be pushed to an entirely new level. Whether it's the Falcon series or Starship, both have proven SpaceX's overwhelming lead in rocket technology. But as a business, rockets alone are actually pretty boring. The company is highly dependent on government contracts, earning one-time launch fees for sending satellites or astronauts to the space station. How could SpaceX evolve from a rocket company dependent on government orders into something with far bigger commercial imagination, essentially a money-printing machine? That's when a project that would eventually transform SpaceX's entire business model was born. Starlink. Chapter 5. Starlink launches. The blueprint for a space economy for most people in China today. Getting online is the most ordinary thing imaginable. Whether you're an office worker in a major city or a villager in a remote mountain area, you can read my articles, hit like, follow, and leave a comment saying my writing is great. This is possible because China, as an infrastructure powerhouse, has built cell towers across nearly every inch of its 9.6 million square kilometers. But outside of China, there are still 2.2 billion people worldwide without internet access. Beyond that, places like airplanes, ocean-going ships, underground mines, vast uninhabited regions, and conflict zones are simply too hard to reach with ground-based towers. But in space, that problem essentially disappears. That's where Starlink comes in. Leveraging its low-cost rocket launches, SpaceX can place massive numbers of satellites in low Earth orbit to form a network, then beam internet service down to the ground. Freed from dependence on ground infrastructure, Starlink customers can get online on airplanes, sailors can get online on cargo ships out at sea, and researchers at Antarctic stations can get online too. IT can essentially cover any location on Earth. As of this past March, SpaceX has launched over 11,000 Starlink satellites in total. Starlink currently has more than 10 million subscribers. In 2025 alone, Starlink contributed $11.4 billion in revenue to SpaceX, with a profit margin as high as 39%. Musk's next step is connecting Starlink directly to ordinary phones, eventually aiming to cover all 6 billion mobile phone users on Earth. With this, SpaceX transformed from a company that earned money once per launch into one generating steady recurring cash flow from a global consumer subscription base. In the early stages of the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022, Russian forces attacked and crippled Ukraine's ground communication towers, collapsing the country's communication system. Musk announced that Starlink was activated across all of Ukraine, allowing everything from frontline command to drone operations to logistics and civilian services to keep functioning. This was the first time the world saw a private company genuinely influence the outcome of a war. At this point, Musk's influence had already far surpassed that of a typical business tycoon. But for a man who dreams of colonizing Mars, that still wasn't enough. Chapter 6. And even bigger reusable rockets are genuinely cool. Starlink's profitability is genuinely impressive. The dream of colonizing Mars is romantic beyond measure. But if you zoom out to look at the broader business world, these stories have actually never been at center stage. For the past 20 years, the spotlight has belonged to a different group of people. Bezos's e-commerce empire, Google's search empire, Mark Zuckerberg's social media empire, even an outsider like TikTok with its immersive short video platform. And now, in the AI era, companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and NVIDIA have become the new gods of the industry. They have the most users, the fattest profits, the highest valuations, and an influence reshaping the old world that even Musk envies. Musk wasn't content watching from the sidelines while others performed center stage. In 2023, as ChatGPT swept the world, Musk hastily launched his own AI venture, XAI. He poached people from rivals with 8-figure pay packages, threw unlimited amounts of money at the problem, and pushed his team through his signature relentless, brutal 996 work culture. But XAI's results still fell well short of its competitors. Musk himself later publicly admitted that XAI had even gotten its initial infrastructure direction wrong. Meanwhile, the entire AI industry entered a trillion-dollar arms race. Every tech giant was throwing money around like crazy, building data centers, competing for limited grid power, land, and water resources on a planet that simply doesn't have unlimited supply. The competition kept intensifying, costs kept climbing, and the table just kept getting more crowded. Hold on, wait a second. What about space? Anyone who argues with people often enough knows the secret to winning is shifting the fight to a battlefield you control. Watching his rivals constantly hype up how limitless AI's future supposedly was, painting these enormous visions, Musk thought to himself, is your pie bigger than my interstellar civilization pie? Since I already control the narrative around space, why not combine it with AI? In December 2025, Musk proposed a new concept, building data centers in space. This would bypass ground-based constraints entirely, using uninterrupted 24-hour solar power, using the vacuum of space for cooling, and using Starship's low launch costs to rapidly deploy networks. This completely sidesteps every ground-based approval process, supply chain bottleneck, and resource limitation, essentially opening up a brand new lane outside the track everyone else was already fighting bloody to compete on. In Musk's vision of the future, AI and robots will eventually be everywhere on Earth. They'll need far more bandwidth and computing power than exists today, and SpaceX intends to supply all of it from space, ultimately transforming from a rocket company into a giant ecosystem spanning space, communications, and artificial intelligence. In other words, if I can't beat you guys on Earth, can I beat you in space instead? You can't even get up here. In February 2026, SpaceX acquired xAI at a valuation of $250 billion, and the gears of this giant ecosystem started turning. But pulling off this enormous vision requires even more money, even for someone who is already the richest person on Earth. So where would that money come from? Going public. Chapter 7. The biggest IPO in human history. In July 2024, while campaigning for president, Trump survived an assassination attempt during a rally. After the failed attack, Trump raised his fist and shouted "Fight," producing a photo that drew comparisons to the famous French painting Liberty leading the people. This moment fired up a lot of Americans, Musk included. Musk soon posted that he saw in Trump the kind of masculine resolve America truly needed. From then on, he threw his full support behind Trump's campaign, donating $290 million, and personally appearing on stage and giving speeches in support. 6 months later, Trump took office for his second term, and Musk, having played a major role in getting him there, rose to become one of the most powerful people in America, with enormous sway in Washington. Behind Musk's soaring power was the fact that the Silicon Valley tech capital he represented had become one of the most powerful interest groups in America. The bureaucratic processes and regulatory obstacles that once plagued SpaceX from within the system were no longer an issue. This cleared the way for Musk's next move, taking SpaceX public. On May 20th, 2026, SpaceX officially filed its prospectus, planning to list on Nasdaq with a target raise of $75 billion and a targeted valuation of $1.7 trillion. Normally, before going public, a management team has to crisscross the country pitching investors, much like job hunting fresh graduates blasting out resumes everywhere. Even someone as accomplished as Lei Jun got worn ragged doing roadshows before his company's IPO. But with Musk, the dynamic flipped entirely. Ahead of the listing, JP Morgan personally hosted a private interview event for Musk at its New York headquarters, packed with top global investment institutions, entirely invitation only. Amusingly, Musk himself didn't even show up in person. He simply dialed in via video call and told the world's top investors, through a screen, that humanity must go to Mars. On June 12, 2026, SpaceX officially listed on Nasdaq on its first day of trading. The stock surged 19%, closing the day at a market cap of $2.1 trillion, making it the seventh most valuable company in the world. Musk, who holds 42% of SpaceX, saw his net worth surge alongside it, hitting $1.1 trillion, making him the first person in human history worth over $1 trillion. Converted into Chinese yuan, that's roughly 7.4 trillion. That figure exceeds the combined wealth of the world's second through fifth richest people, an overwhelming, decisive lead. Even John D. Rockefeller, humanity's first billionaire 113 years ago, doesn't come close to Musk's wealth, even after adjusting for inflation. People like me, who came up through the internet industry, love talking about things on a massive scale. Over my own career, I've gone through community platforms, short video, and instant retail that I've experienced plenty of moments that genuinely excited me, transforming a traditional industry, glimpsing $1 trillion market opportunity, and those moments are a big part of what's kept me motivated to keep working hard all these years. But all those moments that once excited me feel small next to SpaceX's vision. Whether you look at it from a business angle or from the angle of civilization and history, what could possibly be bigger than the phrase, turning humanity into a multi-planetary species? That said, as a serious business analysis channel, I do need to pour a little cold water here and pull everyone back from the extreme dreams of business titans toward reality. In SpaceX's prospectus, the AI segment is actually the main force supposedly justifying its $2.1 trillion valuation. But as mentioned earlier, XAI is honestly second tier at best, and being acquired by SpaceX hasn't really changed that. In fact, most of XAI's original founding team has already left, unable to tolerate Musk's intense management style. Musk's repeated success in engineering and manufacturing doesn't seem to translate at all to AI. And while Musk has painted a vision of space-based data centers generating returns 100 times the size of Earth's economy, when it comes to actual commercialization, even SpaceX's own prospectus has to warn investors that this may never become commercially viable. In 2025, SpaceX poured $16.6 billion into these grand ambitions, but its revenue during the same period didn't even cover half of that spending. Right now, expansion is being funded entirely through financing and debt. This is the main reason an IPO became necessary. Just writing these realities down already gives me a headache. That I've seen similarly wild bets play out at several once famous companies in China, and the founders of two of the most well-known ones today. One is in America, still chasing the dream against the odds, and one is back in China working a sewing machine. Well, I won't name names. Of course, these are problems for Musk to figure out. He's only 55 this year, still very much in his prime. That if Musk manages to solve all of this, he'll absolutely deserve a spot among the top 10 figures in human civilization. As for how it all ends, I think that's a more gripping story than any high-rated American drama I've ever binged. I'll keep following these developments and write more updates as things unfold. Chapter 8. So, in the end, how should we judge Musk? I don't want to evaluate him purely from a business angle. Let me follow his own lead and elevate the discussion to the level of human civilization that I was born in the 90s, part of a generation that grew up living through an era of rapid technological change. In my own life, by just 30 years old, I've already lived through pagers, the explosion of the PC internet, then the mobile internet, and now the explosion of AI. This can give you the feeling that technological progress is simply inevitable, something that just naturally keeps happening. But technology can absolutely regress. The ancient Egyptians built the pyramids, then lost the knowledge of how to build them. The ancient Romans built urban drainage systems 2,000 years ago that rivaled modern infrastructure, but after the fall of Constantinople, Europeans lost that knowledge for the next 1,000 years. Even China, famous for its continuous civilization, went through chaotic periods in its history, like the Five Dynasties and Ten Kingdoms era, marked by widespread famine and desperation, that if certain individuals hadn't stepped up to turn the tide, civilization can and does slide backward. And over the past decade, nearly all of the major advances in mainstream technology have, in one way or another, been driven by Musk. Electric vehicles, energy storage, autonomous driving, humanoid robots, Starlink, brain-computer interfaces, rockets. Even OpenAI, the company that kicked off this entire AI revolution, only got off the ground because Musk initially funded it with $100 million. Earlier I said Musk's obsessive drive came from the science fiction novels he read as a kid. And at SpaceX's IPO event, Musk said this: his goal has never changed. Strip away the fictional elements from those science fiction novels and extend the light of human consciousness out among the stars. This piece is now nearing its end. Sue Exine, a well-known investor, once said that the most fulfilling part of investing is being able to grow alongside a company. Watching a founder continuously evolve, watching an idea become a product, then transform an entire industry. Sometimes even reshaping the daily habits of hundreds of millions of people. After finishing this piece, I understand exactly what she meant. While researching this piece, I revisited the Elon Musk biography and most of Musk's interviews from around the time of SpaceX's IPO. It helped me connect all the scattered memories I'd had of Musk since college into one coherent story. From a rocket business nobody believed in, to 3 failed launches that nearly ended everything, to a string of business miracles that genuinely excited me just writing about them. The whole arc reads like an epic spanning more than 2 decades. And what's strangest of all is that while I kept researching, writing, and revising, even my own train of thought seemed to drift along with the story. And by the time I snapped back to reality, I'd written a piece over 10,000 characters long. Once words are put down on paper, their fate is no longer entirely up to the author. The science fiction authors Musk read as a kid surely never imagined their words would ignite the passion for space inside a somewhat awkward, introverted child, and years later helped create the largest IPO in human history and the world's first trillionaire. I have no idea whether this piece of mine will spark something in some reader out there, pulling them towards space, AI, robotics, or whatever frontier comes next, and lead to miracles even I can't yet imagine. China and America are, today, essentially the only 2 countries competing intensely across nearly every major technology field. For nearly every giant that exists in America, China has a counterpart racing to catch up. From the internet to semiconductors to AI, this pattern holds in every case. In fact, a wave of private Chinese commercial spaceflight companies is already rising. though of course we're still the ones playing catch-up for now. But Chinese ingenuity and work ethic have never fallen short of anyone else's. Someday, China may well give rise to a company, no, an entire wave of companies, capable of catching up to SpaceX, or even surpassing it.